Guys, welcome to another episode of The Pulse. You know what we do. We've got people who are doing cool things. They've got great stories, and they're spending time with us. And we've got somebody who has kind of blazed a trail, done a bunch of different things. No, it's cool because you kind of set up the path that a lot of us either looked to or wanted to do. Mr. Marc Summers, actor, host, what else? Motivational speaker.
Orthopedic shoe salesman. I'll do anything. It's interesting. I love hearing the fact that people your age who grew up watching the show say they got in this industry because they saw the fun we were having back in the Nickelodeon days, and they kind of wanted to emulate that. So that's a big compliment when I hear that.
It's cool because it is, and I'm not that funny, and so
it never stopped me. Trust me.
I'm not sure that I could do things like that, but it did.
That is peculiar to think about, but also Nickelodeon did a lot of research back in the day and found out that kids did not have their own game show, and that kids were living vicariously watching Price is Right with their parents. And so they went to playgrounds and talked to kids. And they were playing a game called Truth or Dare at the time, which became Double Dare. And they found out that kids were being rewarded at home by keeping their room neat and clean and doing everything perfectly. And now we were rewarding them for getting messy. And we kind of took the other side of what the parents wanted them to do, and it just clicked magically.
Did you ever think it would grow into this?
No. You're lucky if you get a job. Secondly, if you get a game show or a talk show and it lasts 13 weeks, you figure, well, it's going to get canceled and I'll never do this again. Mm-hmm. So when we did the first 65 of Double Dare, right here in Philadelphia, down the street at WHYY, we thought it was good, but I never thought it was going to go 525 episodes. And then we toured it all around the country, playing 20,000-seat arenas and selling them out the Palace or Auburn Hills twice in a weekend, that kind of thing. And I had no idea. I was 34 when I got that job, and I was one step out the door because I didn't think it was going to happen. And at age 34 and getting on Nickelodeon changed my life.
I had no idea you're doing 20,000-seat arenas on tour. That's
like being a rock star for kids.
Right. And hosting a kids show that adults kind of got a cult following. But 20,000-seat arenas for a game, that's still unheard of.
Yeah, it's nuts. Nobody really has done it before or since. It was just a magical time. We started to play malls, and we would get 5,000 people to show up at a mall, which meant that the entrance to Macy's or any of the major department stores were blocked.
How did you get into this? What is the path to Marc Summers' life?
I came home from school when I was in 6th grade, and on ABC there was a show called Who Do You Trust? And the host was Johnny Carson. Okay. And I was obsessed with Johnny at an early age. And then he took over The Tonight Show. And when my parents went to bed, I would sneak back down at age 11 or 12 and watch The Tonight Show. And I found out that Johnny started his career as a magician. And I thought, well, if Johnny did that, maybe I should do that. So I started doing magic. And there was a magic club in my junior high, and I learned from there. Next thing I know, I was doing birthday parties and weddings and dog shows and wakes and whatever else I could. Then I was walking down the street in Indianapolis. There was a national magic convention, and a guy came up and said, I want to learn magic. How do I do magic? And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I'm a disc jockey. And I said, if you teach me how to be a disc jockey, I'll teach you how to do magic. And the next thing I know, I'm doing weekends 6 to 11 at WBMP in Elwood, Indiana. I was 15 years old. And when I left WBMP, Dave Letterman took my place.
Really?
Yeah, he was living in Indianapolis, and they needed somebody, and I was too young to drive, and my driver went away. The guy who was working with me left.
Wow. So you stepped aside, and you're like, I got things to do, Dave.
That's right. I don't know whatever happened to him.
You handle this one. I know. Who was that guy?
I don't know.
So you got started young doing this, but
yeah.
It seems like young, you knew this was kind of the path.
It's all I ever wanted to do. I really didn't, want to be a doctor, a lawyer. Although my parents wanted me to do that, I never did. I went to school in Boston. I went to LA in 1973 and started working in a club called the Magic Castle. And you had to audition, and I was working 28 shows a week, making $145. That's all. It was crazy, but thrilled to do it. And then I was a page at CBS Television City to kind of help pay the bills. And then I became a regular at the Comedy Store in 1976, along with Dave and Jay, Gary Shandling, Robin Williams. A whole bunch of us started in that genre of comics. And I realized quickly I wasn't very good at it.
For the people who are watching on TV, Fox 29, Fox Local, Fox Soul nationally. We're streaming live behind the scenes. So guys, as you know, every day we're doing these shows live on Fox Local, and we are downstairs at Fox 29 in the Pulse studio. We decided, because the whole thing with Fox Local is giving you insight and looks at things that you haven't necessarily seen before.
Are you ready? Come on, we got...
This is how I'm treated. Let me flip this around. So this is the Pulse studio.
How are you?
Mr. Marc Summers, how are you, sir?
Nice to see you. How's life?
Because I think it's kind of cool for
It
them to
is.
get to see how all of this happens behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
So there's like cameras behind the cameras.
And
back
yet, this is not too different from back in the day when I started, except the equipment is much smaller and much better than these gigantic cameras. When I started on a show called Romper Room in Indianapolis when I was 5 years old, and the cameras wouldn't fit in this room, and they were so gigantic.
All that behind the scenes, the training, the trailblazing, the radio, the comedy. When did you know that this was a career? This was the path that you were going to stay on?
When I was a page, I worked on the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Bob Newhart, and there was a man by the name of Lorenzo Music. He did the best warm-up I've ever seen in my entire life. And I went into his office. I had no fear of seeing or talking to anybody. And the one thing I learned about show business is you have to lie. And I went into his office and I said, you know, I do warm-ups. And he said, really, what shows? And I made up things that I never did. And he said, well, give me your number, and someday if I can't do a warm-up, I'll call you. Okay, great. Well, 2 weeks later, the phone rings, and they were doing a pilot with a guy by the name of Barnard Hughes, a Broadway star called Doc on CBS. And he said, I can't do it. Can you fill in for me? And I said, sure. Well, I was pooping my pants, Bill, because I had never done it before. I didn't know what to do. And I wrote stuff down, and I did magic, and I did a little stand-up. And at the end of the night, Grant Tinker, who ran Mary Tyler Moore Productions and was married to Mary Tyler Moore, came down the stairway, threw his arms around me, and said, that may be the best warm-up I've ever seen in my entire life. By the way, I had no idea what I had just done for the last 3 or 4 hours. And it opened up a door for me. So I became, first I did a variety show called The Mac Davis Show. Then I did Shields and Yarnell. And then I worked on a show called Soap, which at the time was the hottest sitcom. And everybody came to see me. Now, when I was doing the warm-ups on Soap, stage next to me was Bosom Buddies, and Bob Saget was doing the warm-up on that. And the stage to the left of me was Barney Miller, and David Letterman's doing the warm-up on Barney Miller.
Dude just kept following you around.
It was amazing. So we all got our start that way. And I did, at one point, I was doing Tuesday night Alice, Wednesday during the day Hour Magazine, Wednesday and Thursday night I did Star Search, Friday I did Soap. Soap got canceled, I did Webster. Webster got canceled, I did What's Happening Now. Game shows on the weekends. So I was working 6 days a week, asking people where they're from and telling them when to applaud, and it was paying handsomely. I was making 6 figures in 1979, asking silly questions to an audience.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. And behind the scenes, we're carrying around a phone and a selfie stick.
That's hysterical.
Thanks for that.
That's hysterical.
Like, appreciate you coming. Like, you know, thanks.
I love it.
Thanks so much. Coming up next, yes, he's often smiling, but that doesn't mean he hasn't faced adversity.
I had an executive at NBC told me that my name was too ethnic because my real name is Berkowitz, and that my nose was too big, and until I got my nose done and changed my name, he would never hire me.
There's a quote that I throw up on Instagram that if somebody offers you an amazing opportunity, you don't know how to do it, say yes and then figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. Never
Feels
say
like
no.
You did that?
Yeah.
And then they called your bluff, and you're like, wait, I actually have to fly the plane?
That's
like,
right.
It is, and it just worked for you.
It just worked for me, and I never did accept the word no. I had an executive at NBC told me that my name was too ethnic because my real name is Berkowitz, and that my nose was too big, and until I got my nose done and changed my name, he would never hire me. And in my mind, I thought, you know what? This guy will be here like another 6 months, and then I'll meet the next guy. And that was it. He got fired, and then I came in and, you know, finally got to the right people, and one thing after another happened. But you have to be determined. And we're going to talk about my one-man show, I know, a little bit later, but
yeah.
Part of it is overcoming obstacles. Why do some people just throw their hands up and give up, and other people just keep moving forward?
2 things that I just got from that. One, that even then somebody was bold enough and ignorant enough to say that to you.
You're right.
And 2, that you were strong enough to push through it. Like both challenges that are to this day, you know, are challenges for people.
Correct, sir.
You talked about the one-man show, the life and slime of Marc Summers.
Right.
Okay. Tell us about this. How did this come to be?
happen?
Right.
I came to New York in 1964 and saw my first Broadway show, Fiddler on the Roof, and I'd never seen anything like that. And I thought, oh my God, what is that, and how do I become a part of that? And so I always put it in the back of my mind. I wanted to be on Broadway. That was just a goal I had.
Okay.
And I went through many obstacles in my life. First with obsessive compulsive disorder, then I was in a car accident here in Philadelphia where I broke every bone in my face. And then I've had cancer a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a gentleman by the name of Bruce Valanche, and he was doing the leading role in Hairspray in New York on Broadway. And I started talking about doing theater, and he said, Summers, I've known you for 20 years. Stop talking about it and do it already. And found a way to get in Greece, in Long Beach Island, New Jersey, and play Vince Fontaine. And when I was playing that part, I met a guy by the name of Drew Gasparini. And Drew wrote music but was in the show with me and introduced me to his friend Alex Brightman. Alex Brightman now has been nominated for 2 Tonys. He was the star of School of Rock and also for Beetlejuice. And we started hanging around, and I said one night, I want to do a one-man show. And they interviewed me for a year and a half, just took notes. And at the end of that year and a half, Alex Brightman handed me a script and said, here's your one-man show. And first we did it in Bloomington, Indiana. Then we did the Adirondack Theater Festival. A little thing called COVID happened, and we stopped performing. Mm-hmm. And last January, I got a phone call that somebody wanted to bring the show back. In September, we did it in Buffalo, New York, at a place called Alleyway Theater. And the show was going well, but the Mrs. Doubtfire tour opened up next door to us. And the director of the Doubtfire tour came to see our show and said, have you ever thought of doing this in New York? And I said, every day, but I don't know anybody. He said, you do now. 4 months later, we opened off Broadway in New York City.
Like, I completely get, in talking to you, why your life is a show, a book. I mean, it's
Why?
Because it's entertaining, one.
Yeah.
It's absolutely inspiring. Like, you are continuing with a smile and determination while talking about some really challenging stories.
Yes, sir.
And I just think it's the kind of thing that will make people feel good because it didn't stop you.
The show's very emotional. I talk a lot about going through these things, and I do break down often. When we started writing the show, I said to Alex, if somebody walks in and doesn't know who Marc Summers is, the show and the story still has to be great. Yeah. And my goal was to make somebody cry. That was really my goal. And on night number 1 in Bloomington, I was able to do that. When Alex Brightman came up to our opening night show, he came up to me and said, when did you learn how to act? And that was the best compliment in the world. It took me 8 years to kind of put the pieces together and figure it out. But it's really a solid show right now. And the fact that we got booked 16 weeks in New York City is mind-boggling to me.
Coming up next, he learned early in his career that even great mentors sometimes tell you no. Your name drops are a lot better than mine.
And I called up Barker and I said, I want to audition for Johnny's job. And he said, Mark, absolutely not.
I double dare you to come and see the life and slimes of Marc Summers. You could get on stage, you could relive your childhood, but I think you'll be inspired and perhaps learn a few things you were unaware of. So come and join us.
I think people think it's going to be funny and nostalgic, and I think that it is. But I think what people do not expect is that it's incredibly emotional.
You touched on the challenges. You talked about OCD, and that can be, crippling. It can be stifling. You talked about the challenges with cancer, the accident. That's always the hardest part to share, I guess.
I believe in really paying things forward. Yeah. And apparently people are relating to many of the topics that I'm talking about. I had a woman who hired me first at Lifetime TV and then at Food Network, and she came to the show, and she said the other day, that show changed my life. I didn't know how to get through the last quarter of my life in the proper way. I was stifled. And by seeing this show, I think I have it figured out now. That was the nicest thing anybody could say.
Joe Coy was just here. Jay Moore was just here.
Oh, my God, all big names.
Well, but they're people, and the names aside, they tell similar stories.
Do they?
In that their shows, comedy or otherwise, are helpful to other people, and that's their commitment, but it's also therapy and catharsis for them.
Right.
Like, to continue to tell their story.
100%.
Is that fair to say that?
I would say yes, sir.
All right, so what's next?
I'm still a half a step away from Broadway. We're off Broadway. We're at 50th and 8th. Maybe, I don't expect to get a lead, but a tiny part on Broadway would be fun. I mean, maybe our show could even transfer to Broadway. Who knows? But I never give up. You know, I don't accept the word no. I don't accept, you know. And it's funny, when people give you advice, sometimes you don't want to accept it. There was a man by the name of Johnny Olson. Johnny Olson announced every game show for Goodson Todman for 20 or 30 years. And he passed away. And everybody wanted to replace him for a couple of reasons. One, the money was going to be great. And he had a lot of shows. And Price is Right was the main show. And I was friends with Bob Barker because I wrote a show called Truth or Consequences the last year he hosted it.
Your name drops are a lot better than mine.
And I called up Barker and I said, I want to audition for Johnny's job. And he said, Mark, absolutely not. And I said, why? I was like taken aback by that. And he said, you're not an announcer, you're a host. And I thought initially, but then you know what? I'm glad he said that. Because that may have trapped me in an area that I would have never gotten out of. And he was wise enough and astute enough to say, I could do that, but I'm not going to allow you to do it. So you have to have mentors who understand what it is that you want to do and take it to the next step. I mean, I'd love to talk to Joe Coy. I don't know if you broke the conversation about him recently doing the Golden Globes and everybody bashing him. If people only knew how hard that job was. He had 2 weeks to put a script together, where I just saw a thing on CBS Sunday mornings where Jimmy Kimmel had 4 months to do the monologue for the Oscars. 4 months, 2 weeks. Come on, give me a break.
At that point, I think he was kind of all talked out about that particular topic. But what was interesting about him is, much like you, he seemed unfazed. Like, it clearly, I mean, it bothered him.
It has to.
You know, it would have to bother him. But this guy is living his life, and he's happy every day.
And he's great at it.
That this is the life you get to live.
And he sells out 20,000 seat arenas every night.
Yeah.
He's going to be here. Where is he playing in Philly? I forget.
He's at the Wells Fargo.
Wells
Center.
Fargo. Well,
Yeah.
okay. That ain't a small venue. And that
Allen Iverson and Joe Coy. Selling them out.
He's selling them out.
Yeah.
But I bet Joe Coy has more money than Allen Iverson. That's for sure.
I mean, look, we already joked about this. I'm still trying to get a new selfie stick. So however much money the folks have,
You know, I can help you
we'll
out.
see. Like, I don't count other people's money. Next on The Pulse, I get a little helpful career advice.
You know why you're
who not.
successful?
Tell me, am I successful?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me why.
Well, I tell you why.
The theme of The Pulse is use your voice for good and trying to see how people are doing those positive things.
Right.
I know that you've been involved with a lot of different work with charity, kind of helping people out. So start there. Like, what are the things that are important to you, and why is it important that you do it?
Alex's Lemonade Stand, based here in Philadelphia. I became a member of the board maybe 15 years ago. And that organization is amazing. The money goes where it should go, to the kids and to the hospitals. Educating people about OCD has been fantastic via the show and other things. I've been a national spokesperson for the Obsessive Compulsive Foundation for a couple of years. And as I say, paying it forward, at the end of the show, there are people who meet you at the stage door, and everybody has a story. And you can't just go, hey, yeah, that's nice, and move on. You got to give them the time. Either they grew up watching me and something that I did affected their lives, and you got to learn not to blow people off. I don't care. You got a dinner appointment in 10 minutes? They'll wait. Those people stayed outside that door for an extra 20 or 30 minutes because they wanted to have a conversation. That's important to me, and that's special, the fact that anybody wants to stay afterwards and have that conversation. So this is kind of, I'm a golden rule guy. Treat others as you want to be treated. But here's the other line that I live by. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And that's how I live my life.
I appreciate you doing this. This was fun. For
You know
people
why
who
you're
are not.
successful?
Tell me, am I successful?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me why.
Well, I tell you why. Because you do your homework, okay, and you listen. And I remember being on the Joan Rivers show, and I was supposed to be looking at Joan, but the whole time she was looking over here at the cue cards, and she wasn't listening to me at all. You're listening, you're taking notes, and I would venture to say that that pad that you have with 1 million things on it, you haven't gone to, because you're talking to me about what we just talked about, and that's why you're a good host.
I appreciate that.
It's true.
I would almost end the show, but they're telling us
How much time do we have?
that seems like right. Like, thanks for watching. I was most familiar with Marc Summers as the Double Dare guy and sliming people and game show host and all those kind of things. But sitting down and having a conversation with him, I'm so glad I did. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Just hearing the whole story, who he is, what he overcame, how he is inspiring people, and his show. It was a pleasure. I leave you as I always do, reminding you whenever you can, use your voice for good and have a good one.